Maya's alarm clock buzzed at 9 p.m. every single day. While most people were winding down for the evening, getting ready to watch TV or spend time with their families, Maya was just starting her day. She worked the night shift at a small office, building downtown, typing numbers into computers until the sun came up. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid her bills and kept her invisible, which is exactly how she preferred things. At 28 years old, Maya had become an expert at being forgotten. She had mastered the art of walking through life without leaving footprints, speaking so quietly that people had to lean in to hear her, and choosing clothes that helped her blend into any background. Gray sweaters, black pants, brown shoes that made no sound on the office floors. She was like a ghost, present but never really there. Her childhood had taught her this skill early. From one foster home to another, she learned that the quiet kids were the safe kids, the ones who didn't cause trouble, didn't ask for too much, and didn't get their hopes up about staying anywhere permanently. She had lived with 7 different families between the ages of 5 and 18. Some were kind, but busy. Others were just doing their job. None of them ever looked at her and thought, "This is the child we want to keep forever." Every time social workers came to visit, Maya would watch other kids in the system get chosen by new families. She would sit in the corner of the waiting room, hands folded in her lap, hoping someone might notice her too. But families always seemed to want the younger kids, the ones who laughed loudly and asked lots of questions, the ones who weren't, afraid to hug strangers. Maya was too scared to be any of those things. By the time she aged out of the system, Maya had accepted a truth that felt as solid as gravity. Some people were meant to be chosen, and others were meant to watch from the sidelines. She fell into the second category, and she made peace with it because she had no other choice. Her apartment reflected this acceptance perfectly. It was small, clean, and completely bare of personality. White walls with nothing hanging on them. A couch she had bought used from a thrift store. A dining table for one with a single chair. No photographs, no decorations, no signs that anyone actually lived there and enjoyed living there. It looked like a hotel room where the guest was always about to check out. Maya's daily routine never changed. She would wake up at 8:30 p.m., shower, eat something simple from a can or box, and walk the 15 minutes to work through downtown. The walk took her through Central Park, where she became an unwilling observer of other people's lives. Families having picnics on blankets, throwing frisbees, teaching their children how to ride bicycles. Couples sitting on benches, sharing ice cream cones and laughing at jokes only they understood. Groups of friends playing volleyball, shouting encouragement to each other, celebrating small victories like they were winning Olympic gold. Maya would walk past all of this human connection like she was watching a movie. She could see it, she could hear it, but there was an invisible wall between her and everyone else. She had tried, years ago, to join in. She had approached a group of women her age who played tennis every weekend, asking if she could learn to play with them. They had been polite but distant, telling her the group was full, maybe next season. She had volunteered at a local community center, hoping to make friends while helping others. But even in volunteer work, people seemed to form natural partnerships and friendships that somehow never included her. At work, Maya's invisibility reached its peak. She worked in a large room with 12 other people, all typing away at their computers, processing data for accounting firms across the city. Her desk was in the back corner, positioned so that she could see everyone, but no one had to look at her unless they specifically turned around. Her co-workers were friendly enough in a surface-level way. They said good morning when they arrived, asked how her weekend was without really listening to the answer, and included her in the group birthday celebrations that happened once a month, in the break room. But Maya noticed things that others probably didn't. She noticed that when people were planning to grab dinner together after work, the invitations were passed around to everyone except her. When coworkers shared personal stories during lunch breaks, talking about their relationships or family drama or weekend plans, they never asked Maya to share anything about her own life. Not that she would have known what to say anyway. The loneliness wasn't sharp anymore. It had become like background music, always there but easy to ignore if you weren't paying attention. Maya had learned to fill her life with small pleasures that didn't require other people. She read library books during her lunch breaks. She watched cooking shows on TV and sometimes tried to make the recipes, even though she was only cooking for one. She took long walks through different neighborhoods, imagining what it might be like to live in houses where families gathered around dinner tables and argued about whose turn it was to do the dishes. Sometimes, late at night during her work shift when the office was completely quiet except for the sound of keyboards clicking, Maya would wonder what was wrong with her. Why couldn't she make the connections that seemed to come so naturally to everyone else? Was she too quiet, too boring, too damaged from a childhood spent never knowing if she would be wanted tomorrow? She would run through conversations she had attempted, trying to figure out where they went wrong, why people's eyes would glaze over when she spoke, why invitations never came her way. But these wondering sessions never lasted long. Maya had learned that asking why about her situation was like asking why the sky was blue or why water was wet. Some things just were the way they were, and spending energy trying to change them was pointless. Better to accept reality and make the best of it. The closest Maya came to companionship was her relationship with Ben, the security guard who worked the same night shift. Ben was in his 60s, a kind man who had worked security jobs his entire adult life. He would stop by Maya's desk twice during each shift to check in, asking if she needed anything, if the building was too cold, if her computer was working properly. These conversations never lasted more than 3 minutes, but they were the longest personal interactions Maya had with another human being most days. Even Ben, though, kept their relationship strictly professional. He never shared details about his own life, never asked Maya about hers beyond work-related questions. She knew he lived alone, too, based on comments he had made about his quiet apartment and his habit of watching old movies until dawn after his shift ended. Sometimes Maya wondered if they might become friends, two lonely people finding companionship in their shared night schedule. But Ben maintained a polite distance that Maya respected and never tried to cross. This was Maya's life at 28. Predictable, safe, and utterly alone. She had stopped expecting phone calls, stopped checking her mailbox for anything other than bills, stopped imagining what it might feel like to have someone worry about her if she didn't come home on time. She had built a life that required nothing from other people and offered nothing in return, and she told herself every single day that this was enough, that wanting more was dangerous, that hoping for connection had only ever led to disappointment, and she was too old now to keep setting herself up for heartbreak. But sometimes, walking through the park on her way to work, watching families and friends and couples sharing their lives with each other, Maya felt an ache in her chest that was so deep and so familiar that she barely noticed it anymore. It was the ache of a person who had never been anyone's first choice, never been anyone's favorite, never been the person someone else couldn't wait to see at the end of a long day. Maya had made peace with being alone, but she had never stopped, wishing in the quietest corner of her heart that someday someone might choose her. Tuesday evening started like every other evening in Maya's carefully ordered world. Her alarm buzzed at 9 p.m. sharp, and she went through her usual routine without thinking. Shower, simple dinner of instant soup and crackers, grab her work bag, and head out into the cool night air. The weather forecast had mentioned rain, but Maya didn't pay much attention to weather reports. Rain or shine, she walked the same route to work every single day. By the time she reached the halfway point of her journey, the light drizzle had turned into a steady downpour. Maya pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders and quickened her pace. The streets were nearly empty except for the occasional car splashing through puddles, their headlights cutting through the darkness. She kept her head down, focused on avoiding the deeper puddles, when she heard something that made her stop in her tracks. It was a soft, whimpering sound, barely audible over the patter of rain on concrete. Maya paused, listening carefully. There it was again, coming from somewhere, behind her apartment building. She had lived in this neighborhood for 3 years and had never heard anything like it before. Most people would have kept walking, especially in the rain, especially when they were already running late for work. But something about that sound pulled at Maya in a way she couldn't explain. She turned around and walked toward the narrow alley that ran behind her building, where the garbage dumpsters were kept. The smell hit her first, a mixture of wet cardboard, food waste, and something else she couldn't identify. Then she saw him. A dog was huddled between 2 large dumpsters, trying to find shelter from the rain under a piece of torn cardboard that was doing almost nothing to keep him dry. He was medium-sized, with fur that might have been brown or black. It was impossible to tell under all the dirt and matted hair. His ribs were clearly visible through his soaked coat, and one of his back legs was held at an odd angle, like he was trying not to put weight on it. The moment the dog saw Maya, his body tensed. His ears flattened against his head, and he pressed himself further back into the narrow space between the dumpsters. But he didn't run. He just watched her with eyes that held a mixture of hope and terror that Maya recognized immediately. It was the same expression she had worn as a child, sitting in those foster home waiting rooms, wanting desperately to be chosen but terrified of what might happen if someone actually noticed her. Maya crouched down slowly, making herself as small and non-threatening as possible. She had never owned a pet before. The foster homes had never allowed animals, and her tiny apartment had a strict no-pets policy that she had never thought to question. But something about this dog's eyes made her forget about rules and policies and all the practical reasons why she should just keep walking to work. "Hey there," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "You look like you're having a pretty rough night, too." The dog's ears twitched at the sound of her voice, but he didn't move closer. Maya could see him shivering, whether from cold or fear or both. His breathing was quick and shallow, and every few seconds he would glance toward the mouth of the alley like he was planning an escape route. Maya had never been good with people, but somehow, talking to this scared animal felt easier than any conversation she had attempted in years. Maybe it was because he couldn't judge her words or find her boring. Maybe it was because they both understood what it felt like to be forgotten by the world. "I know exactly how you feel," Maya said softly, settling into a more comfortable position despite the rain soaking through her clothes. "Nobody ever picks people like us, do they? We're the ones who get left behind." The dog's shivering seemed to ease slightly at the sound of her calm voice. Maya noticed that despite his obvious hunger and exhaustion, there was intelligence in his eyes. This wasn't a dog who had always lived on the streets. Someone had cared for him once, taught him to trust humans, and then abandoned him to figure out survival on his own. Maya reached slowly into her work bag and pulled out the granola bar she always packed for her midnight break. She unwrapped it carefully, broke off a small piece, and held it out toward the dog. He stared at the food for a long moment, his hunger clearly warring with his fear. Finally, hunger won. He stretched his neck forward just far enough to snatch the piece of granola bar from her fingers before quickly retreating to his safe spot. As he chewed the small morsel, Maya could see his tail give the tiniest wag. It was barely visible, just the slightest movement, but it was there. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Maya felt genuinely needed by another living being. "You're going to freeze out here," Maya said, glancing up at the rain. That showed no signs of stopping. "And that leg doesn't look good. When was the last time you had a real meal?" The dog finished the granola bar piece and looked at her expectantly. Maya broke off another piece, then another, until the entire bar was gone. With each offering, the dog grew slightly bolder until he was taking the food directly from her. Palm, without immediately retreating, Maya checked her phone. She was already 20 minutes late for work, something that had never happened in her 3 years of employment. Ben would probably notice her absence and might even worry about her, she realized. The thought of someone noticing she was missing gave her an odd feeling she couldn't quite identify, but looking at this shivering, injured dog who was now watching her with cautious hope, Maya made a decision that surprised even her. She had spent her entire life following rules, staying invisible, never causing trouble or inconveniencing anyone. She had never missed a day of work, never been late, never done anything spontaneous or risky. "What if I told you I know a place that's warm and dry?" Maya asked the dog. "It's not much, and I'm not sure you'd like it, but it's better than this alley." The dog tilted his head slightly, as if he was actually considering her offer. Maya knew it was ridiculous to think he understood her words, but something in his posture suggested he was listening, really listening, in a way that humans rarely did. Maya stood up slowly and took a step back from the dumpsters. "I'm going to walk toward my building now," she said. "You can follow me if you want to, or you can stay here. It's up to you." She turned and began walking toward the back entrance of her apartment building, her heart pounding with nervousness and excitement and a dozen other emotions she couldn't name. Behind her, she heard the soft sound of paws on wet concrete. When Maya reached her building's back door and turned around, the dog was following her at a distance of about 10 feet. He stopped when she stopped, watching her carefully. They stood, there in the rain for a moment, two lost souls evaluating each other, both afraid to hope for something better than what they had. Maya opened the back door to her building and held it wide. "Last chance," she said softly. "I can't promise I'll be any good at taking care of you. I've never taken care of anyone before. But I can promise you'll be warm and dry, and there's more food upstairs." The dog looked at the open doorway, then at Maya, then back at the doorway. Maya could practically see him weighing his options. The familiar misery of the streets versus the unknown risk of trusting another human who might let him down. Finally, moving slowly and carefully, the dog limped through the doorway into the building. Maya followed behind him, her hands shaking as she closed the door on both of their old lives. Neither of them knew it yet, but in that moment, everything changed. For the first time in either of their lives, they had chosen each other. Maya's hands were still shaking as she unlocked her apartment door. The dog stood in the hallway behind her, dripping wet and trembling, his eyes darting between her face and the open doorway like he was still deciding whether to run. Maya had never brought anyone home before, let alone a scared, injured animal she had found behind a dumpster. Her heart was beating so fast, she wondered if the dog could hear it. "Okay," Maya said quietly, stepping into her apartment and leaving the door wide open. "This is it. Not much to look at, but it's warm." The dog poked his nose through the doorway but kept his body in the hallway, ready to bolt. Maya understood that feeling completely. She had spent most of her life with one foot out the door, never fully committing to any situation because she had learned that leaving first hurt less than being left behind. Maya disappeared into her bathroom and returned with every towel she owned, which wasn't many. She spread one on the floor near the entrance and sat down on it, patting the space beside her. "Come on," she said softly. "Let's get you dried off before you catch something worse." It took almost 10 minutes of patient waiting before the dog finally stepped all the way into the apartment. Even then, he stayed pressed against the wall, as far from Maya as possible while still being inside. But he was inside, and that felt like a victory worth celebrating. Maya had never touched a dog before, and she wasn't sure how to begin. She held out a towel and let him sniff it first, then very gently began patting the water from his fur. The dog flinched at first contact but didn't pull away. As Maya worked, she could feel how thin he was under all that wet fur. His ribs stood out sharply, and she could count each vertebra along his spine. "What should I call you?" Maya asked as she worked. She had never named anything before. not even a houseplant. "You look like you might have been handsome once, under all this mud. Maybe Charlie? You seem like a Charlie." The dog's ears perked up slightly at the name, though Maya couldn't tell if it was recognition or just the sound of her voice. As she continued drying him off, she noticed that his injured leg was swollen and tender. He needed medical attention. But Maya had no idea how much veterinary care cost or even where the nearest animal clinic was located. After she had done her best with the towels, Maya opened her tiny refrigerator and stared at its contents. A carton of eggs that were probably expired, some leftover takeout from 3 days ago, a loaf of bread, and not much else. She had never cooked for anyone but herself, and her meals were usually whatever required the least effort. She scrambled 2 eggs in her only frying pan, toasted 2 pieces of bread, and divided everything between 2 plates. She set 1 plate on the floor near Charlie and kept the other for herself, sitting cross-legged on her kitchen floor to eat. It was the first time Maya had ever shared a meal with anyone in her apartment. Charlie approached the food cautiously, sniffing it thoroughly before taking his first bite. Then he ate like he hadn't seen food in weeks, which was probably true. Maya found herself smiling as she watched him eat, something she rarely did anymore. There was something deeply satisfying about feeding someone who was genuinely hungry, about providing something that was desperately needed. That first night, Charlie slept on a pile of blankets Maya had arranged near the front door. She could hear him shifting and whimpering throughout the night, probably having bad dreams about whatever he had experienced on the streets. Maya lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to another living being breathe in her space for the first time in her adult life. It should have felt strange or invasive, but instead, it felt like coming alive after years of holding her breath. The next morning, Maya called in sick to work for the first time in 3 years. She told Ben she had caught something and wouldn't be in that evening. It wasn't technically a lie. She had caught something, just not what he would expect. She had caught hope, and it was more disorienting than any flu. Maya spent her first day off work in years learning how to be responsible for another living being. She discovered that Charlie was house-trained, which suggested he had lived with a family before ending up on the streets. He knew basic commands, like sit and stay, though he seemed surprised when Maya praised him for following them, like he had forgotten that good behavior might be rewarded. She found a veterinary clinic online and made an appointment for later that week, using money from her emergency savings fund. The receptionist was kind when Maya explained that she had found a stray dog, offering advice about what to expect and how much basic treatment might cost. Maya realized this was the longest phone conversation she had had with a stranger in months. As the days passed, Charlie began to relax in small increments. He stopped sleeping by the door and moved his blanket pile closer to Maya's bedroom. He started following her around the apartment, not because he was clingy, but because he seemed curious about her routines. Maya found herself talking to him constantly, sharing thoughts and observations she had never spoken aloud before. "I never realized how quiet this place was until you got here," Maya told him one evening as they sat together on her couch, Charlie's head resting cautiously on her knee. "I thought I liked the quiet, but I think maybe I was just afraid of my own voice." Charlie looked up at her with those intelligent brown eyes, and Maya could swear he understood every word. She began sharing stories about her childhood, about the foster homes and the loneliness and the feeling of never quite belonging anywhere. Charlie listened without judgment, without offering advice, without trying to fix her problems. He just listened, which was something Maya had never experienced before. The transformation was gradual but undeniable. Maya started buying actual groceries instead of living on instant meals and takeout. She bought dog food and treats and toys, which meant decorating her apartment for the first time since she had moved in. She found herself waking up earlier, not because she had to, but because Charlie needed walks, and she discovered she enjoyed their morning routine. Walking Charlie introduced Maya to a world she had observed but never participated in. At the dog park, Other pet owners struck up conversations about breeds and training tips and veterinary recommendations. Maya, who had spent years perfecting the art of being invisible, found herself talking to strangers about Charlie's progress and personality. The dog became a bridge to human connection she had never been able to build on her own. But even as Maya began to bloom under the responsibility of caring for Charlie, a familiar fear grew in the back of her mind. This happiness felt too good to be true, too fragile to last. Every time Charlie showed her affection, every time he chose to curl up beside her instead of maintaining his distance, Maya felt grateful and terrified in equal measure. She had never had anything worth losing before, and the possibility of loss made every good moment feel bittersweet. Late at night, when Charlie was sleeping peacefully on his blankets and Maya was lying in bed listening to his gentle snoring, she would whisper fears into the darkness. "Please don't leave me," she would say so quietly that even she could barely hear it. "Everyone always leaves me, but please don't be like everyone else." Charlie never answered, of course, but sometimes his tail would thump once against the floor, like he heard her anyway and was trying to reassure her. Maya had no way of knowing that her worst fears were about to be tested in ways she never could have imagined. 6 months had passed since Maya found Charlie behind those dumpsters, and her life had become something she barely recognized. Her apartment now had dog toys scattered across the floor, a comfortable bed by the window where Charlie liked to watch the street, and actual photos stuck to her refrigerator. Pictures of Charlie at the park, Charlie sleeping in a patch of sunlight, Charlie wearing the bright red collar Maya had bought him for his birthday, even though she had no idea when his real birthday was. That Saturday morning started like any other weekend. Maya woke up to Charlie's wet nose nudging her hand, his way of politely asking for breakfast and their morning walk. She had learned to read his signals over the months, the specific bark that meant he needed to go outside, the way he tilted, his head when he was confused, the soft whine he made when he was happy but too polite to demand attention. They walked to Riverside Park, the same route they took every weekend. Charlie had grown stronger and healthier under Maya's care. His limp was barely noticeable now. His coat was shiny and clean, and he had gained enough weight that his ribs no longer showed through his fur. More importantly, he had learned to trust again. He no longer flinched when Maya moved too quickly, and he had stopped checking the exits every time they entered a new space. The park was busier than usual that morning. Families were having picnics, children were playing on the playground, and the dog park section was full of pets running and playing together. Charlie had become popular with the other dog owners over the months. He was gentle with smaller dogs, patient with puppies, and had a calm personality that made him easy to be around. Maya was sitting on her usual bench, watching Charlie sniff around the perimeter of the dog park when she noticed a family walking through the park with papers in their hands. They were clearly looking for something, stopping to talk to other dog owners and showing them whatever was printed on those papers. The family consisted of a man and woman in their 40s and 2 children who looked to be around 8 and 10 years old. Maya felt her stomach clench with anxiety, though she couldn't explain why. Something about the way they were searching, the urgency in their movements, made her nervous. She called Charlie back to her side, clipping his leash to his collar just as the family approached her bench. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice filled with hope and desperation. "We're looking for our dog. He's been missing for about 8 months now. Have you seen him?" She held out a flyer with a photo of a dog that looked remarkably similar to Charlie. Same size, same coloring, same intelligent brown eyes. The name at the top of the flyer read, "Rex, missing since October." Maya's world tilted sideways. She looked down at Charlie, who was sitting calmly beside her, completely unaware that his entire existence was about to be questioned. The dog in the photo could have been Charlie's twin, but Maya tried to focus on the differences. The ears were slightly different angles, weren't they? The markings around the face weren't exactly the same, were they? "We live about 3 miles from here," the man explained, pulling out his phone to show Maya more photos. Rex escaped from our backyard during a thunderstorm. We've been searching for him ever since. Our kids have been heartbroken. We never stopped hoping we'd find him." The children pressed closer, staring at Charlie with wide eyes full of recognition and joy. "That's him!" the younger child whispered excitedly. "That's Rex! Look, he has the same white patch on his chest." Maya's throat felt like it was closing. She looked at Charlie, really looked at him, trying to see him objectively for the first time in months. The white patch on his chest that she had always thought was unique to him. The way he tilted his head when he was listening carefully. The exact shade of brown in his fur. "What's your dog's name?" the woman asked gently, noticing Maya's distress. "Charlie," Maya managed to whisper. The family exchanged glances. "Rex," the father called softly, and Charlie's ears perked up immediately. Not just the polite attention he gave to any human voice, but the quick, alert response of a dog who recognized his name. Maya felt like she was drowning. This family clearly loved their dog. They had spent 8 months searching for him, never giving up hope. They had the resources to provide him with excellent care, expensive veterinary treatments, a big backyard, children who would play with him and give him the kind of active, fun life that Maya's quiet apartment could never offer. Who? Was she to keep a dog from his real family? Maya thought about her own childhood, how desperately she had wanted someone to search for her, to never give up on finding her. How could she deny this family their chance to be reunited with their beloved pet? But looking at Charlie, Maya felt, her heart breaking in ways she didn't know were possible. He had become more than just her pet. He was her family, her best friend, the reason she got up in the morning and came home every evening. He had taught her how to love and be loved in return. Losing him would mean returning to the loneliness that had defined her entire life before. He arrived. The family was kind and understanding as Maya explained how she had found Charlie injured and starving behind her apartment building. They listened to her story about nursing him back to health, about the vet visits and the careful rehabilitation. They could see how much she loved him, just as she could see how much they had missed him. "We can't thank you enough for taking care of him," the mother said, tears in her eyes. "You saved his life, but we hope you understand that we need to take him home. Our children have been praying every night that we'd find him." Maya looked at Charlie one more time. He seemed confused by all the attention, looking back and forth between Maya and the family like he was trying to understand what was happening. She realized that this was her chance to do something she had never been able to do before, put someone else's happiness before her own fear of being alone. "Can I have a few days?" Maya asked, her voice barely steady. "To say goodbye properly? And to make sure he's really your Rex?" The family agreed, understanding that this was incredibly difficult for Maya. They exchanged phone numbers and made plans to meet again in 3 days. As they walked away, Maya heard the children talking excitedly about all the things they wanted to do with Rex when he came home. Maya sat on that bench for a long time after the family left. Charlie pressed against her side, both of them staring out at the park where families played together under the warm sun. She had finally found someone who chose her, and now she was going to have to choose to let him go. That night, Maya lay awake listening to Charlie sleep, memorizing the sound of his breathing, trying to prepare herself for the silence that would fill her apartment again in just 3 days. She had never known that love could hurt this much, or that doing the right thing could feel so much like losing everything that mattered. The 3 days that followed were the longest of Maya's life. She had called in sick to work again, something that would have been unthinkable before Charlie came into her life. But she couldn't bear the thought of spending her last nights with him sitting in an office building, typing numbers into computers while he waited alone in the apartment. Instead, Maya devoted every moment to creating memories she could hold on to after he was gone. They took longer walks than usual, visiting every park and street corner where they had shared special moments over the past 6 months. She bought him a special dinner from the fancy pet store downtown, real chicken and sweet potatoes that cost more than she usually spent on her own meals for a week. Charlie seemed to sense that something was different. He stayed closer to Maya than usual, following her from room to room in their small apartment. When she sat on the couch, he pressed himself against her side instead of maintaining his usual, polite distance. At night, instead of sleeping on his bed by the window, he curled up on the floor next to Maya's bed, as close as he could get without actually climbing up beside her. Maya found herself talking to Charlie more than ever during those 3 days, sharing thoughts and fears she had never spoken aloud to anyone, human or animal. "I need you to know that these have been the best 6 months of my life," she whispered to him on their final morning together. "Before you came along, I had forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone. You taught me that I could take care of another living being, that I could be needed and wanted and loved." Charlie looked up at her with those intelligent brown eyes, his tail wagging slowly, like he understood the sadness in her voice but wanted to reassure her anyway. That afternoon, Maya packed a bag with all of Charlie's belongings, his toys, his favorite blanket, the expensive dog food she had been buying, and the red collar that had been his first gift from her. She included a letter she had written too. The family, explaining Charlie's favorite foods, his daily routine, and the little quirks she had discovered about his personality over the months they had been together. The meeting was set for 4 p.m. at the same park where the family had first approached her. Maya arrived early, wanting a few final minutes alone with Charlie before she had to say goodbye forever. They sat on their usual bench, and Maya tried to memorize everything about this moment. The way Charlie's fur felt under her fingers, the warmth of his body pressed against her leg, the contented sigh he made when she scratched behind his ears. The family arrived right on time, their faces bright with excitement and anticipation. The children could barely contain themselves, bouncing on their toes as they approached Charlie. Maya could see the love in their eyes, the genuine joy at being reunited with their beloved pet. It should have made her feel better about her decision, but instead, it made her heart ache even more. "We brought his old collar and some of his favorite toys from home," the mother said gently, showing Maya a worn leather collar and a rope toy that had clearly been loved and played with for years. "We thought they might help him remember us." Maya nodded, trying to keep her composure as she handed over Charlie's leash. "He likes to sleep near the window where he can watch the street," she said, her voice barely steady. "And he gets worried during thunderstorms, so playing soft music helps calm him down. He knows all the basic commands, but he's very gentle, so you never have to raise your voice with him." The father was attaching the old collar to Charlie's neck when something unexpected happened. Instead of showing excitement or recognition, Charlie began to whine. Not the happy whine Maya had learned meant he was pleased, but a distressed, anxious sound she had never heard from him before. He kept looking back at Maya, then at the family, then back at Maya again, like he was trying to understand why she was giving him away. When the family began to walk toward the park exit, Charlie resisted. He planted his feet and refused to move, pulling back toward Maya with a determination that surprised everyone. The children tried calling him by his old name, Rex, but Charlie just whined louder and strained against the leash, trying to return to Maya's side. "He's probably just confused," the mother said, though she looked concerned. "It's been 8 months. Maybe he needs time to readjust." But as they continued trying to lead Charlie away from the park, his distress became more obvious. He wasn't just confused or scared. He was actively choosing Maya over the family who claimed to be his original owners. The realization hit everyone at the same moment. "Wait," the father said suddenly, stopping in the middle of the path. "Rex had a scar on his left ear from when he was a puppy, a small nick from running into a fence." He gently examined Charlie's ears, then looked up with a mixture of disappointment and understanding. "This isn't Rex. This dog doesn't have the scar." The family gathered around, comparing Charlie to the photos on their phones more carefully than they had before. Now that they were really looking, the differences became obvious. The shape of the nose was slightly different. The white markings on the chest were in a different pattern. This dog might look similar to Rex, but he wasn't their beloved pet. Maya felt her knees go weak with relief and confusion. "But he responded when you called him Rex," she said. "Lots of dogs respond to any name if it's said in the right tone," the father explained kindly. "We wanted him to be Rex so badly that we saw what we hoped to see instead of what was really there." The family was disappointed, but they were also understanding. They had seen the bond between Maya and Charlie, had witnessed how distressed he became at the thought of being separated from her. "This dog belongs with you," the mother said with a sad smile. "It's obvious that you two were meant to find each other." As the family walked away to continue their search for the real Rex, Maya sank down onto the ground and wrapped her arms around Charlie. He covered her face with kisses, his tail wagging so hard his entire body shook with joy. For the first time in either of their lives, someone had chosen to stay instead of leave. "I can't believe you picked me," Maya whispered into Charlie's fur. "Out of everyone in the world, you picked me." Charlie pulled back to look at her, and Maya could swear she saw understanding in his eyes. They had both been abandoned and overlooked their entire lives, both convinced that they weren't worthy of being chosen. But somehow, they had found each other and discovered that sometimes the most powerful bonds are formed between two souls who understand what it means to be left behind. That night, as they settled into their usual routine in their small apartment, Maya realized that home wasn't a place or a building. Home was Charlie's contented sigh as he curled up beside her. Home was knowing that someone would be excited to see her at the end of every day. Home was the quiet certainty that she finally belonged somewhere, to someone who had actively chosen to stay. For the first time in her life, Maya understood what it meant to be someone's first choice, their favorite, their family. And as Charlie's gentle snoring filled the apartment, Maya smiled and whispered the words she had waited 28 years to say, "I'm home too."